Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Institute for Australian Chinese Arts and Culture at Western Sydney University. I'm Professor Jing Han, the director of this institute. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge that we are on Parramatta South campus, which is on the land of the Darug people of the Darug Nation, and acknowledge their ancestors who have been the traditional owners of the land for thousands of years. And we'd also want to pay our respect to the First Nations elders of this country we are sitting on today, past, present, and emerging. The aim of IAC Culture Talks is to build up cultural knowledge and understanding of multiculturality through sharing recent studies of specific areas that will engage, inform, and enlighten audiences, so as to better understand and relate to the world of diversity and understand humanities from a diverse range of cultural perspectives. For lecture number 3, we are very pleased and privileged to have Dr. Minglu Chen, a senior lecturer in the Department of Government and International Relations and a member of the China Studies Center at the University of Sydney. Dr. Minglu Chen is a highly regarded researcher of Chinese studies. Her research concentrates on social and political change in China, especially the interaction between entrepreneurs and the state, and women's political participation. She has published her research in the China Quarterly, the China Journal, and Journal of Contemporary China, and is the author of Tiger Girls, Women and Enterprises in the People's Republic of China, published by Routledge. Today, Dr. Minglu Chen will speak about innocent young girls, 无知少女, the search for female provincial leaders in China. A topic is of a great interest to many people and myself. Female representation in politics and governance and women's role in a predominantly patriarchal world have been hotly debated around the world and also changing rapidly as well. Take Australia, for example. In recent months, we have female CEOs taking over Reserve Bank of Australia, Qantas, and a week ago, the first female Vice-Chancellor of the Australian National University, ANU. So it'd be really interesting to have Minglu share her research about China. Just to let you know that at the end of Dr. Chen's presentation, we will take questions from the audience. So during the presentation, please feel free to post your questions in Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. Now, please welcome Dr. Minglu Chen to give her presentation. Minglu, please take the virtual stage.
Thank you so much, Professor Han. It is an absolute pleasure to be able to be here and share my research findings with you. Let me just bring up my PowerPoint slides. So before I start, I would also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands on which I sit today, the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, and I pay my respect to the knowledge embedded forever within the Aboriginal custodianship of country. So the innocent young girls, this is currently my new research interest, one of the few projects that I am conducting on the topic of Chinese women in politics. So thinking about Chinese women in politics, I think normally this is what comes to mind to a lot of us, right? Just there is really not many women. The current development on the political arena that was last year, end of last year, the 20th Chinese Communist Party National Congress held in October, right? This Congress caught the world's attention just because, among many things, that for the first time in 20 years, the Congress elected a Politburo with no female member. So this is really the action which has broken a 2-decade tradition of, I wouldn't say a lot of female representation, but at least minimal female representation. So just a little bit on this. I don't think this is something new, right? Even in the past, before October last year, I don't think it was a greatly bright picture that when we think about women in politics in China. I don't think I'm the first person to point out this to everybody, but Chinese women's political participation really has highlighted a gender gap in many aspects. We can talk about all this in the Q&A, but think, for example, the traditional gendered labor division of men outside, women inside, the Confucian norms of male dominance, female subordination, this all obstructed women's access to power. But this is not by all means only happening in China. Also, domestic duties and cultural attitudes prevent women from building effective networks. That is very important for them to build their political career. Also, I think in China, and not just in China, many people hold this understanding that politics is just not for women. Women are not considered as natural, political, or public animals. So as a result, I think this is one aspect of the many reasons that women are underrepresented in Chinese politics, not just at this level here, the very top, the core of the party center, but also at the grassroots. But as I have said, right, women's underrepresentation in politics is just not just a unique situation that women face in China alone, right? Worldwide, we see vast gender inequality in political life. So this is, I don't think it's that recent a example anymore. 2011, Tony Abbott's famous slogan, "Ditch the witch," and also more recently in the last year's G20 summit, we can see how few women are there standing on the stage of political leaders. So I think worldwide, we have now realized, right, women face cultural, social, as well as institutional barriers when they want to enter the public career or political career. In many cultures, there are patriarchal and hierarchical attitudes and norms that apply to women. Also, gender social capital means that women just cannot build up an important social network to participate as well as to advance in formal politics. At the same time, other factors also matter. Gender quotas, party ideology, the design of a particular electoral system, they're all institutional factors that could affect the outcome of if and when women run for office. So another example to bring to your attention here is the 2016 US presidential election. Hillary Clinton, what she had gone through, I think that's still relatively fresh memories for many of us, right? How she had to face a gendered double standard in her election campaigns. Whenever she appeared too feminine, she would be considered not tough enough for the role of the US president. But if she appeared too aggressive, then she would be regarded as being not a real woman. So since this is not a China unique issue, now why are we looking at China today? Right? Because I think the Chinese case is still interesting and unique in its own ways, because the Chinese Communist Party, I think, has a very strong ideological commitment to gender equality, to women's emancipation. which you can see is reflected in some of the most important documents of the Chinese Communist Party state. The Constitution of the People's Republic of China was written with this very important provision that women in the country should enjoy equal rights with men in all spheres of life. Then later on, the Chinese Communist Party's own institution that was written about three decades after the Constitution was written, that was early 1980s, right? This Constitution of the CCP included this sentence, right? The Chinese Communist Party attaches great importance to the training and promotion of women cadres. So interesting statements, but I would say these two are both quite vague statements that really, it mentions women's political rights, but it does not really provide any concrete measures on how women could realize these equal rights in politics. So just a little bit of statistics to share with you. I think if we look at the legislation in China, the People's Congress, the picture is actually not too bad. Currently, over a quarter of women are in the Congress's membership. Then in the other big political institution, the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, over 20% of women are holding membership. So there's something interesting about the Congress, which I want to share with you, right? The Congress has got a little bit of something like a quota system, right? Since the year of 1988, the National People's Congress has provided this one sentence which requires that the proportion of female members within each term of the National People's Congress should not be lower than the last term. So this is interesting. So every time we see a new National People's Congress being formed this year, we actually hear this increased proportion of female members, right? This very vague quota system has enabled the People's Congress to actually make such claims. But in general, the Chinese Communist Party is pretty much still a boy club. So more than 70% of Communist Party members are male. So if we look at political leadership in this party state system, only about 1/4 of any type of leadership positions are currently being held by women, and most of them are lower level leadership positions. So this is interesting because we can see there's this very clear mismatch between this state ideological commitment to women's emancipation and the current reality of China's social economic conditions. So obviously, when we think about the Chinese Communist Party's commitment to women's rights, then the era that comes to our mind would be the Mao era, right? In the past, things had been a lot better. That's a lot of people's understanding, right? During the Mao era, there had been important manifestations of the Chinese Communist Party's ideological commitment to gender equality, such as this very famous quotation here on this poster, "Women can hold up half the sky." And also here is another propaganda poster which says, "The time is different, men and women are the same." So it seems like the conventional understanding is that things had been better before China's economic reform and opening kicked in, right? In the reform period, the changes in the role of the Chinese Communist Party state in relation to the economy, in relation to society, has made it increasingly difficult for this state or party ideology, the state-driven feminism to kind of create a pathway for women to go up. So, but I want to just spend a little bit of time. That shouldn't be the focus of today's talk, but I think a little bit of extra historical context would be necessary. Yeah. I would say, but even during the Mao era, when we look at this ideological commitment to gender equality, I would argue that this commitment has largely overlooked women's political rights. So the Chinese Communist Party states policies addressing gender inequality, if we actually have a research on this, we would see, right, these policies have largely overwhelmingly focused on promoting women's economic growth. Here, this other poster has the words written here, working women are great revolutionary forces. So that tells us a lot, right? Women are effectively seen as an important labor force that contributes to the greater cause of the revolution, of nation building, of economic development. But when such greater causes, when the Chinese Communist Party's agenda or the country's economic needs come into conflict with the goal of full female employment, then guess what? I think women's equality would take second place. I guess a lot of people probably wouldn't completely agree with me. I'm quoting this sentence from one of the leading scholars who have ever produced any work on Chinese women in politics, Stanley Rosen. But this piece was written quite a while ago. In this article, he argued that the Cultural Revolution period, no matter how bad it was, how much chaos it had created, they really represented a breakthrough in terms of women's political roles. And he gave the examples of these two women, right? The first ever full female members to the Politburo of the Chinese Communist Party. The woman on the left is Ye Qun, and the woman on the right is Jiang Qing. Right? I think they had been very powerful women in Chinese politics, but those of you who are familiar with the Chinese Communist Party's history, you would immediately point out to me that, wait a minute, these women also share this common feature that they are married to some even more powerful men of that time in Chinese politics. Ye Qun was wife of Lin Biao for a long time, China's number 2, and Jiang Qing was Madam Mao. Right? Not just that, but actually in my other project, I look at how this women's political participation had been reported, covered by the People's Daily, the Chinese Communist Party's official mouthpiece, right? The discussion of their female identity or their identity as the wife of the powerful male politician is very interesting, right? So when these women were at the very height of their political career, when they were full members of the Politburo, they actually had never been referred to in any gender terms. But as soon as their downfalls happened, Ye Qun died in I think 1973 in the plane crash over currently Outer Mongolia, and Jiang Qing, shortly after Mao died, she was arrested as the leader of the Gang of the Four, right? So after these women's downfalls, that really sexist language had been used by the party's official newspaper to describe them. Like, an example is Jiang Qing was repeatedly referred to as the white-boned demon, a famous character from the Chinese mythology Journey to the West. And this demon who was in disguise of a beautiful woman trying to seduce the monk in the story. Then also in other news coverage, Jiang Qing was often compared with Wu Zetian or Lü Hou, the two very famous queens in Chinese history, who was portrayed as evil women who seized power and implemented tyrannical rule after their husband's death. Right? You see, you can draw a line, a parallel here. That in the case of Ye Qun, it's also very interesting, but her denunciation in gender terms happened in a different way, right? Ye Qun was always referred to as the sidekick of Lin Biao, like partner in crime of Lin Biao, who co-plotted the scheme of Lin Biao's failed assassination of Mao Zedong, right? So when in this report, when this a plan of assassinating Mao was discovered, they tried to escape by airplane. Then Ye Qun had her hair disheveled and she had her stilettos on, and one of her stiletto was found at the side of the plane crash, right? You can see the expression of femininity is seen as discrepant factors in the political field and thus to be lost. So just an example to show you, right? Even though the Communist Party of China had this very strong and very often worded ideological commitment to women's equal rights, right? But behind this narrative, behind this official discourse, right, there still exists a lot of nuance for us to understand. So it is a bad picture at the national level, but at the lower level, the first subnational level, China's provinces, I have discovered in my research that women have been appointed constantly in small numbers to leadership positions. But this seems to have been neglected by a lot of people who work on the topic of women in politics in China or China's political elites. So much so that this paper that I have published on this topic, that seems to be one of the very few recent research on this very topic of women in political leadership in China. But I would say women's low political leadership representation does not mean that they are absent from politics. Right. On the contrary, like because women are now holding positions as top leaders in each of these provincial units, we should not just simply brush them away and say this is not an important phenomenon, particularly because provincial positions often serve as stepping stones for Chinese politicians to go to levels higher above. So how do we decipher this? This is a quote, or this is something I was told. I was in a conversation with this Chinese official a few years ago. He asked me what I was researching on, and I told him about my back then work in progress, which is this very project. I told him I'm looking at provincial female leaders in China. Then his immediate reaction was he laughed. Then he said, oh, well, they are all innocent young girls. So the innocent young girls is a quite famous homonym or a pun in Chinese politics. right? So here, I think we need to have a little bit of a language understanding to really know what this phrase means. So here, Wu refers to no affiliation with the Chinese Communist Party, 无党派, or the party outsiders. 知 means intellectual, the 知识分子. Shao actually stands as 少数民族, ethnic minority groups, and obviously 女 is female. So put together these four characters, 无知少女 also sounds like innocent young girls. So this is a bad joke, but this joke is so widespread everywhere in China. Right? When you talk to someone about 无知少女, or when you conduct a search on Baidu, China's most popular search engine, you actually have a whole page of results that is not about innocent young girls. It's actually results that links to information or articles discussing female political leaders in this system, right? It discusses the idea that in the Chinese Communist Party state's selection of female political leaders, a woman have to have a few different features, right? A woman with a non-Chinese Communist Party affiliation, with an intellectual background, and also an ethnic minority background seems to stand a better chance than a woman without any of these characteristics. So what does this tell us? This narrative reveals a common assumption among not just the public, but also the political actors themselves, right? That Chinese female and male politicians are not competing on equal grounds when they enter the sphere of politics. So when men probably are selected based on their merit, on their performance, and women are only appointed because they are ethnic minority group members, because they had been intellectuals in the past, or because they are not members of the Chinese Communist Party. So in other terms, that this appointment of women should not be taken seriously, because this is nothing but a tokenistic gesture of the Chinese Communist Party to pay lip service, or actually to have a little bit of turn the lip service to a little bit of a practice to show that the Chinese Communist Party is committed to advance the interests of marginalized groups. So my role here, and also this article I wrote, really takes the goal of breaking down this assumption, just to look behind it, to see if this is really what is happening in Chinese politics nowadays. So I have conducted a research of all China's provincial level jurisdictions, excluding Hong Kong and Macau. Just I want to point out that actually this province, what I call provinces here, in reality, they're not necessarily provinces. Most of them are provinces, but some of them are ethnic minority autonomous regions, or a few of them are called cities under direct jurisdiction of the central state. But just for the sake of convenience, I refer to every of these subnational level jurisdiction as a province. So I look at members of this provincial Communist Party committees, excluding the military personnel, because they are appointed through a different system. And also I look at the provincial governments. I do not only focus on the governor themselves, but also the many deputy governors that serve in the provincial governments. So these two different institutions at the provincial level in China, they currently are elected every 5 years. So the new term of the Communist Party Standing Committee of the provincial level jurisdiction, for example, when they are elected, they serve for one term of 5 years. Then in another 5 years, this institution would be elected again and for another 5-year term, the same as the provincial governments. But just because not all provinces had the leadership change in the party committees at the same time. So my data is a little bit messy. It kind of spans over a period of a little bit over 1 decade. So here are some quotes from 2 other documents. One is a document, very important document, I would say, issued by the Chinese Communist Party Central Committee Organization Department in 2001. It is important because this is the first time actually there had been some institutional rules set up that governs how the gender representation in political leadership in China. So the CCP committees and governments in provincial level jurisdictions should each have at least 1 female cadre in its leadership. Then in different documents, the constitution of the Chinese Communist Party, there is this provision that the party's leadership recruitment should be based on important things, knowledge and professionalism. That indicates, I think, kind of justifies intellectuals to be appointed to important leadership positions, with a particular emphasis on the training and selections of women, female cadres of ethnic minority background or ethnic minorities, as well as cadres of non-CCP background for leadership positions. So, as you can see, these words are not accompanied by any more specific policies. So as we can imagine, this has left a lot of space for interpretation. Then the very discourse of the 无知少女, the innocent young girls, falls in this very context, right? It assumes that the lack of institutional rules and oversight undermines political representation of not just women, but also other marginalized groups. In local implementation, that all these various margins are often combined into one, resulting in the complete dominance of male Han and Communist Party member officials of non-intellectual backgrounds. So the emphasis on women's multiple minority as well as marginal backgrounds in the selection process indicates a downplaying, as I said, of merits and performance. And also, once appointed, this innocent young girls discourse assumes that these women only play on a ornamental rather than substantial role in their governance. So just now I'm going to bore you with some data. Just bear with me, I will not go into the details. So this is what I found. Right? In local practice, my research has revealed about 10%, a little bit more than 10% of provincial leadership positions are held by women. Right? Also, in this local provincial jurisdictions practices, the gender quota of at least one female cadre is often implemented just as such, right? As long as there is one woman, it is fine. In a few cases, there have been no women anywhere, but also there have been a few cases there were more than one woman. So it breaks even, right? In every provincial government and every provincial party committee, I think on average, there is one woman each. So in order for us to actually look into this concept of 无知少女. I think we need to understand this provincial leaders' party affiliation, their possible intellectual background, and their ethnic identity, right? So let's have a look here. So party affiliation, this data only includes the governors and deputy governors, because by default, anyone who serves as a member of the Communist Party committee is a Communist Party member, right? So I exclude in this data the party committee side, but only look at the provincial governments. So this data shows that about 8% men and women together are members of either one of the 8 minor political parties exist in Chinese politics, or they do not have any affiliation with any political party. So when we compare the two groups, men and women, then I think there exists a gendered dimension to excess of political power for these party outsiders. So about 18% of the women, they are not affiliated with the Chinese Communist Party, and their male counterparts has about 1/3 of them. Only among the male counterparts, only about 6% of them do not belong to the Chinese Communist Party. So it's women's likability of being a party outsider is 3 times as much as that of their male colleagues. So I think it's safe to argue here that female Communist Party outsiders, they are more likely to secure leadership positions in this system. So, or in other words, we can understand that this elite recruitment system in China's provinces really favors male Communist Party members over female Communist Party members. That's a bit of a logic that I had to get my head around with. So then intellectuals, this is an interesting term. It's utterly important because since it's very early days, the Chinese Communist Party had attached a lot of importance to to governing this group who are called the intellectuals, right? Because the Communist Party needed to harness the knowledge and skills these people have for different reasons: economic development, educational growth, political propaganda, so on and so forth. Also, the party needs to curb any possible harmful influence of these people on the revolutionary project because of their bourgeois or petty bourgeois approaches to life and to politics. So it's an important group, but it has a very fuzzy boundary and unstable meaning. Okay, so in different periods of the Chinese Communist Party history, we have seen so many different groups of people being labeled as the intellectuals, right? Educated Communist Party leaders or educated government officials, former workers or peasants who have ever received any education. Sometimes it's used to describe writers, novelists, and so on and so forth. Sometimes intellectuals would refer to scientists, professors, and other experts, or school teachers, or artists, or any professional workers, or clerical and other office workers. Sometimes it's used to refer to college students, sometimes students of senior high school or junior high school, or individuals with some sort of junior high education. So it's a very kind of fuzzy term, but then if it's so broad and ambiguous, does it actually have any significance? I still think it does. So I'm here adopting a different definition that's put forward by the Chinese Communist Party itself. right? This document issued in 2015 talks about the importance of co-opting these intellectuals, right? So this document says this effort of co-option should target at academic leaders and those who have made significant contribution in important academic fields. So a bit interesting, maybe a good example would be, I don't think I belong to this group of academic leaders or anyone who has made significant contribution, but Han Laoshi here could be one of the 无知少女 intellectual to be co-opted. Bad joke, sorry, this couldn't help. So my research has identified about similar percentage of both male and female provincial leaders with experiences as senior academics, right? About 10% for both groups. And the last category is ethnicity. There are 20% of these women, they are of ethnic minority background. In comparison, their male counterparts, about 11% of the men, they are of ethnic minority background of some sort. So when all these different characteristics are combined together, right, the 无知少女 all put as one, how visible are the innocent young girls in China's provincial politics? So there's out of the 100 odd cases I have in my data set, I have only identified one 无知少女, one innocent young girl who is Cao Xiaohong. She served as deputy mayor of Tianjin for 8 years between 2013 to 2021. So she does not have a Chinese Communist Party membership. Instead, she is a member of one of the minor political parties, the China Zhigong Dang. She worked before entering politics, right? She was a lecturer, then later on dean, then vice president and president of Tianjin University of Science and Technology. She actually has a PhD from Japan, from Chiba University. And Cao Xiaohong, she is a member of one of the ethnic minority groups. She is a Hui. So I would say this is not really the norm. This is an exceptional case. So this is, in this case, when gender interacts with other categories, right, social status and ethnicity, it produces favorable outcomes. Here, I want to stress something. I think when I published this paper, it was circulated for a while on Weibo. Right, a lot of people somehow assumed that I wrote this paper to argue that all Chinese female leaders actually are 无知少女, they are the innocent young girls. I just want to emphasize here that actually that's not really what I'm arguing. I think I'm trying to kind of point to the different direction or the nuance behind this narrative of the innocent young girls. I hope today I'm being convincing, a little bit more convincing, maybe. So, but I would say the nearly non-existence of the 无知少女 in provincial politics does not mean that the practice of minimizing representation of all marginalized groups does not exist, right? Because often we find these women, they actually are non-Chinese Communist Party members. 10% of them had background as intellectuals. 20% of them, they actually have ethnic minority background. And also it's not uncommon to see the group of non-Communist Party member personnel and the group of intellectuals are combined into one. So quite a few of these women, they are non-Communist Party members, as well as they had been academic leaders. But I think we need to be cautious to label this as a completely gendered practice, right? Because when we look at the male counterparts, a impressive 2/3 of these male politicians, they actually are not 2/3 of all male politicians. 2/3 of those male politicians who are not Chinese Communist Party members, they are intellectuals at the same time. So that's a much higher percentage. So I think the coming slides, I try to ask and answer a question to myself, which is, if this 无知少女 thesis does not fully explain women's appointment to provincial leadership, then what are the key selection criteria in the search of female leaders in this system? So I actually, in the last few slides, I will take you through some other the characteristics of this women: age, education, qualification, as well as previous experiences. So when it comes to age, just 2 examples, right? This is Xieru was the youngest of all my samples. So she came to this important leadership position as deputy governor of Jiangxi at the age of 39. And Sun Chunlan, she made it all the way to the Politburo, but before her career tenure started in the Politburo, she actually served at subnational levels. So she came to provincial leadership as party secretary of Fujian at the age of 59. While in comparison, I think the male politicians, they have a much greater age gap of 27 years. Right? The oldest one was Zhang Dejiang when he was appointed as party secretary of Chongqing. He was already 66 years old. And the youngest was Nur Bakri, who was appointed as a member of the Xinjiang Communist Party's standing committee at the age of 39. So all these details probably does not matter that much, but I think the comparison here matter quite a lot, right? So when we look at these different groups of governors, deputy governors, members of the Communist Party standing committees being compared, so women compared with men, one interesting thing stands out is, except for this one category, the governors and deputy governors appointed in 2018, in every of this group, right, the average age of women is younger than that of men. So on average, if we look at all these 4 groups together, the women are appointed at the age of 52 and men at the age of 52.2. So statistically, this probably doesn't sound very significant, but I think it has a very important significance behind it. Well, it's poorly worded. Anyways, so women are promoted to these leadership positions actually quicker than their male counterparts. That is counterintuitive, right? We understand that in general, when it comes to age, it has never been a level playing ground for men and women. We know that women often fall behind their male colleagues in their careers, should they be politicians or not, or quite early on. So the fact that women actually come to these very important leadership positions much quicker begs a little bit more investigation, and I will come back to this. I think I'm running very slowly out of time, so I will just speed up. So this is the educational degrees held by these provincial leaders, men and women compared. I think one important message to take away here is this is a really well-educated group of people, right? All of them have been to college. 98% of them actually have got at least one university degree, if not more. But obviously, you would say, hey, a lot of these people, they only had their degrees after they came to leadership roles. But I would say the fact that they actually would take the effort to actually pursue a educational degree means that this Communist Party states recruitment emphasis put on meritocracy has worked. Right? So coming to the previous background of these politicians, these women, right, before they came to provincial leadership positions, I think two types of backgrounds really stand out. One is their experiences as leaders in the Women's Federation. That is, I think, understandable because the Women's Federation has traditionally been an important tool in the recruitment of China's female leaders. And the Youth League, this is interesting, right? We know the Youth League has been an important fast track for China's political leaders, but actually it matters more for the female politicians than for male politicians. That is something extraordinary. I think the reason behind these lines, so here 30% of female leaders have Youth League affiliation, whereas only 18% of male leaders has Youth League affiliation. So why so? I think the reason really lies in the fact that the selection pool for female political leaders is much smaller. So you don't have a lot of women who occupy senior executive positions in state-owned enterprises. And often there is this revolving door between the SOEs and the party state institutions, right? You don't see a lot of women actually being appointed down or being parachuting from the center to the provinces, whereas this happens a lot with male politicians. Also, women do not seem to be receiving all these interprovincial appointments. You don't often see a woman serving as provincial leaders in different provincial jurisdictions. So just some quick concluding remarks. So what is a typical female provincial leader in this system? I would say she is very educated, often with a postgraduate degree in her early 50s. She is rather a member of the Chinese Communist Party rather than a party outsider, and she would be of the Han ethnic minority background. I argue that they are appointed not simply as tokenistic representative of the marginalized groups. So because they actually have been appointed on the same grounds as their male colleagues in terms of education, age, party affiliation, and experience. So what really matters is a formal quota system that would really increase the number of female leaders, as well as addressing gender inequality in other fields.